Okay, so if you've ever wanted to come up with a great domain name, a domain name that's unforgettable, a domain name that people remember, a domain name that maybe is just remarkable, I'm going to share with you a quick and easy tip and way to come up with these domain names so that way it makes it simple for you to really stand out from the crowd. Stay tuned. Okay, so one of the things about domain names is if you're trying to get an online business going, a domain name is a great way for people to just look up your company or business without kind of remembering the IP address. Now, one of the great places to get a domain name is Pork Bun, who's also my sponsor, and you can get out some great domain names for cheap, and they also have great privacy settings as well. So in order for you to come up with a great domain name, a domain name is basically yourname.com. So if you take a look here at my site right here, you've got backstageincome.com. And this is just one way to do it, but I have other websites as well that you can pull up with just a .com. So if you're looking to come up with a great domain name, what you can do is come up with this formula. So I'm going to share with you this formula here, and it's actually pretty simple. So here's how the formula goes. So you basically start doing some math. So you could go A plus B plus C plus D equals your domain. So how does this all work? Well, the way that it works is that what you can do is you take parts of the English speech and language, and this is from dictionary.com. You could take things like nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections, combine them and make yourself a domain name. So how does this all really work? So I won't bog you down with all the English grammar because I'm not also the best at it. But really what it works, the way that it works is you could say, okay, well, I want a noun plus an adjective, and that equals my domain name. Or what you could do is do something different. I want an adjective plus a noun equals my domain name. Okay, so now you've got basically a domain name there. Okay, so here's an example. Why don't we go in and say we're looking at a tasty food blog or recipe? So I could say, okay, well, I want yummyeggs.com. So now I've got my noun, I've got my adjective, and I've got my domain name. Now, if this was a problem or issue, let's say this domain name was taken, what I could do is add to it. So I could go in and add, okay, well, I could do A plus B equals my domain. So now what you can do is add to it. Super yummy eggs.com. Okay, so all it takes is just coming up with a list of words from your English dictionary and library, like nouns, could be a person, place, or thing. So Franklin, boy, river, Bible, desk, fear, happiness. Pronouns could be you, he, she, it, we. Verbs could be basically become, blunt, inflate, run, so they express actions. So it just depends on your website or blog, right? So for some blogs, pronouns might not be really worthwhile, but it could be. For example, she writes. So she writes fast. That could be great for a copywriting person to coming up with a domain name. For other people, verbs might be something that's more useful. Let's say you're doing a fitness blog and you go in and you've got something like run quickly, or run weight loss. So whatever the case is, you're basically coming up with formulas here that mix and match what makes sense for you, and you're looking at coming up with different formulas. And for some people, you could do A plus B plus C plus A, and now you've got your domain name. So you're just really mixing and matching all these things that come up with a great domain name. So how do you do this to make it worthwhile? Well, what you could do is start out with, okay, here's a list of adjectives. Here's a list of nouns that you're interested in. Here's a list of maybe pronouns. So what you're doing is you're going off your list, and as you go through your list, you're basically writing down all these different adjectives, you're writing down all these different nouns, you're writing down all these different pronouns, and you say, okay, well, why don't I try these different combinations and then see what happens. So as you try different combos, you'll see, hey, some combinations work a little bit better than others, and some might be just taken. So that's a little bit of what you're trying to do, is you're trying to mix and match a lot of these things together to come up with a formula. So I got adjectives, nouns, pronouns, but then what you might say, okay, well, this isn't really working. I have some problems. So why don't I do, okay, adjective, adjective, a noun, and then a pronoun or something like this. So now you've got kind of like a different formula. Okay, so you do the same thing now. Okay, so now I've got this list, this list, this list, this list. And now you say, okay, well, let me go in and aim to mix some of these things up. So we're going to go in on this and say, okay, well, let me connect the dots. How is that going to go? Okay, if that doesn't work, okay, let's try a different approach. Let's go back to noun plus noun plus adjective. And that's all I'm doing. I'm really just kind of mixing things up as I'm working through this to go in and say, okay, well, what is it that makes sense? So playing around with all these different combinations and doing some testing to see really what makes sense for your blog, and then just coming up with a list of potential domain name candidates. This is what you're doing, and this is a simple way to do it. You could go in and also, let's say, a list of adjectives. So if you're not sure of adjectives or adverbs or verbs, you could just go into Google or any website for that matter, list of adjectives. So now if you go in, and you could even go into the images area, and here we could just pull one up, and this will give you a list of adjectives. Or here's an adjectives list. You could do descriptive adjectives. So there's a ton of different things right there. And just starting things out. You could also do a list of, let's say, Scrabble words if you want. So coming up with this list of words, mixing and matching those things can really make it for your domain name. And then what you'll do is you'll just sit on that domain name for maybe a couple of days to think about it, think it through, say it, write it down, because sometimes writing it is also, those couple letters together don't work as well. So putting all those things together really makes the most sense. And then you'll have kind of a list of potential candidates, thinking about the domain name that you're really aiming for. Now, we'll say that domain names have become less critical as far as like choosing and picking the right one. I find if you just pick and choose a domain name that's good, the marketing behind it that you do is probably much more important, or at least pushing people into that website is probably more important than just choosing the most perfect domain name, because traffic's going to come from different sources, whether it's Pinterest, Facebook, YouTube, whatever the case. So don't stress about choosing the ultimate perfect domain name. If you're trying to be like a perfectionist, it's totally okay. But you don't have to worry about it as much as maybe to those huge extremes that some people do. So just kind of, hey, take your time, do your best, come up with a nice little formula or idea for you, brainstorm those things, come up with a domain name, register it, and go from there. Other than that, it doesn't have to be perfect. Good enough is usually fine. And then what you'll do is you'll push the traffic towards it. And that's really where a lot of things start to grow, is once you push that traffic to it, it makes it much more valuable and friendly, and it's able to attract the audience. So anyways, I hope that helps and gives you some insight to choosing and creating and coming up with a great domain name. There's a lot of ways you can do it with those formulas. It really just comes down to your personal preference on what you're trying to do and how complex the subject matter is. So thank you so much for joining me. Hope you enjoyed the video, and feel free to grab some great freebies that I have, including some stuff on niches, domain names, and much more at our website at backstageincome.com.